Hey YouTube, welcome to another Retro Goodies episode. And today this episode is all about the Game Boy. And to be honest with you guys, future episodes just might be all about the Game Boy as well. And that has a lot to do with the fact that I feel like I've zeroed in on my retro collecting. I found like a focus, and that's handheld games. And they just mean a lot to me. They hold a lot of nostalgia for me. I spent a lot of time with the Game Boy as a child, so it's been really fun going back and collecting some of the games that I had as a kid and some of the games that I always wanted to get but never got, and then even finding some games that I never even knew existed or heard about. So it's been a blast going down memory lane with some of this stuff. So this episode is going to be focused on some of the highlights that I've picked up over the past year. I've picked up a lot more Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color games, but you know, I'll show those off whenever I decide to do a collection video. But the things that are in front of me right now are definitely the highlights, and I just wanted to share them with you guys because I was so excited about them. Back in August, I won an auction on eBay for an original Game Boy in-box, and I was so excited. I honestly was. I was the only bidder. It came with the Game Boy and some accessories and also 7 games. So for $25, I really feel like I lucked up on that auction. When I got this in the mail, it just brought back so many memories. I mean, looking at this box totally made me feel like I was like a 9-year-old girl again. Like, I remember getting the Game Boy for Christmas and opening up the present and seeing this. And I was just like, oh my God, like I couldn't believe I actually got it. And that's because I had been asking my parents for a Game Boy. It felt like months. I think the Game Boy came out in the summertime in 1989. I'm not quite sure the original date, but it came out in the summer, and I remember just asking my parents constantly for a Game Boy, and they just kept telling me, you know, you gotta wait for Christmas, maybe Santa will bring it. And Santa actually did bring it, and I was just so excited for it. Now, the reason why I actually, you know, love the Game Boy or just handheld systems in general is because, you know, I have an older brother. Okay, my brother is older. He's 7 years older than I am. And I have a lot of older cousins. So growing up, you know, I was the only girl for, I want to say, a good 8 years. I was the only granddaughter, the only niece. And my grandmother bought us all like a Nintendo. We had an NES. And I remember always sitting down and watching my cousins play and my brother play. They never let me play. Okay, and when I did play, it was because they were either out and I had to sneak in and go play by myself. But once they came back in and they caught me playing, you know, they were like, get off, we want to play. So I never had something of my own, you know, and it wasn't really a big deal back then because I actually did enjoy just sitting down and watching them play, but I always wanted to try to play. And they were always like, no, you're the girl, you're just going to make us die. So I never got to play. And when I found out about the Game Boy, I was like, oh man, this is like my own little thing. Like, I can have this and play and no one will see me lose as much as I do. And they won't make fun of me and say that I'm not good at gaming because it's in the palm of my hand. You know, I can play this and no one else has to see. And that's the thing that I love about the Game Boy, or just portable systems in general, handhelds. I love the fact that it has this sense of intimacy. You know, you're sitting there, and regardless if you're in a room full of other people, you can just kind of zone out and do your own thing and play your own game. This also came with a copy of Tetris. But I just have so many fond memories of playing the Game Boy in my room, you know, or sitting down and watching them play games, you know, and playing my Game Boy and no one really bothering me. And that's what I loved about it. It also came with, I guess this is some kind of connector. I'm not quite sure. I don't really remember this, but I guess this is a Game Boy connector, which is pretty cool. I don't know if I'll ever use it. I never used this back in the day. Game Boy had a few accessories, but I, for some reason, never had any of the accessories that went with the Game Boy. But one of the ones that I wanted was a Light Boy. And luckily, this came in that auction with the Game Boy and another accessory in the games. Now, the Light Boy always was like the thing for me because It's just a light for your Game Boy, and it has this little magnifying glass. And the reason I wanted it, and I found it so funny when I saw this, was for this alone. I wanted to actually fool my parents. When they said it was time to go to sleep, I wanted to actually pull my Game Boy out, you know, after the lights were out, pull the Game Boy out, hook up the Light Boy, and trick my parents. But this says, Light Boy is bound to attract attention. Yeah, that's the main reason why I wanted the Light Boy. I wanted to be able to play my Game Boy when the lights were out, in bed, when I should have been sleeping to get ready for the next day at school. You know, I kind of wanted to do that, which is probably why my parents never got it for me. But this is basically, I don't have any batteries in here, but it's basically just a magnifying glass there and the little switch that you use to turn the light on and off. So I'm going to try to pop this onto the Game Boy so you guys can see what it looks like. So here's the Light Boy in full effect. This thing looks so crazy now looking at it, but I swear back in the day, it was like the coolest thing. That's why I wanted it so bad, you know? And then you could just kind of adjust your magnifying glass. I mean, it's all types of cool. Another accessory that came with the auction was the Newbie Power Pack. And I never actually heard about this, but it seems like it's pretty useful. It's basically like a rechargeable battery for your Game Boy, because we all know how many batteries we wasted back in the day playing Game Boy games. This is just something that you hook onto the back of your Game Boy and you can plug it in and charge it, which seems kind of convenient, but for some reason this cord seems way too short. The power pack just slips onto the back of the Game Boy, and then you plug it in like that, and then you charge it into your wall. Yeah, I doubt I'll ever use this. Let's take a look at some of the Game Boy games that I've actually picked up over the past year. Now again, this isn't everything, but these are definitely some of the highlights. The first two games I'm going to share with you guys, I actually got them from that Game Boy auction that I won on eBay. There were 7 games altogether, but 5 of them were duplicates. So only got 2 games out of that deal, but still it wasn't bad. For $25, it's an awesome deal. First game is Q*bert. And hopefully you guys all know what Q*bert is. I think it started off on the arcade and then it made its way over to the Nintendo. And I didn't even know it was on the Game Boy. I played a bit of this and, you know, I can't really get into this game for some reason. I'm horrible at it. You got here Krusty's Fun House, which really isn't all that fun. Some of the Simpsons games are hit and miss, the older Simpsons games, and this is one of the ones that I really didn't like. You play as Krusty, and I had no clue what was going on. I don't know, just wasn't really that good. I picked up Felix the Cat last summer at a flea market, and it was really cheap. It was like $2, and I was so excited just because I remember getting this as a birthday present from my grandfather. And back then I was like, who in the hell is Felix the Cat? I had no idea who this little character was, but I played the game and I had so much fun with it. It's a fun platformer. Castlevania Legends. I actually got this for a really good price because this game goes for quite a bit. I got it last summer as well. It was only 25 bucks and it's a solid Castlevania game. It's actually one of my favorite Castlevania games. I spent some time with it and I really dig it. It's real good. So if you guys are interested in playing a good Castlevania game on the Game Boy, this is definitely the best one to try out. Joe and Mac was at the flea market last summer as well. I picked it up super cheap and it plays just like the Nintendo game. It's a great platformer that's pretty challenging. I can't get really far in this game for some reason. It's pretty hard. P-Cross 2 is one of the recent games that I've added to my Game Boy collection. I actually got this off of eBay back in August and I'm enjoying it. It's also my first import Game Boy game, which is pretty cool. This series is awesome. You know, it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't really know anything about it, but I highly recommend this series to anyone that enjoys puzzle games. They really are a lot of fun and they're pretty challenging as well. I picked up Cool World this summer at a thrift store and I never actually played this back in the day, but I remember wanting it because I saw the movie in like 1991 or 1992 whenever it came out and I loved it. I haven't seen it in the past like 12 years or so, but Man, after playing this game, I'm kind of glad that I didn't get it back in the day. Now, Mr. Do is definitely a classy game. Hopefully you guys have played this game before. It's an arcade game. It started off in the arcade. And I remember going to the beach every summer, and my parents didn't really play games, but when they saw Mr. Do at the arcade, they would totally play it. They had so much fun playing it. And then I got this. I'm not quite sure when I got it, if it was for Christmas or not, but I did have it in my collection. And I remember my dad would take my Game Boy sometimes and play this game, and sometimes we would even like sit around in the living room and kind of switch off the Game Boy and play. I just have a lot of great memories about Mr. Do. It's a fantastic arcade game, seriously guys. Mercenary Force is quite a little gem. It truly is. And this was actually a blind buy. Like, I had no idea what this game was about. I saw the cover art and I was like, this looks interesting. Let me see. So I picked it up, I bought it, you know, whatever. And it turns out this is a shooter, and it's quite unique. It's pretty different. You have like this squad. I don't know if they're firefighters or whatever, but you have this squad of dudes that just go around and you just kill things in waves. It's so much fun. Got some Game Boy Color games here, and the first two are Mega Man Extreme and Mega Man Extreme 2. I got these off of eBay for $16 a couple months ago for both of them, and I thought that was pretty cool, you know, to try them out. I'm not a big Mega Man fan, you know, I haven't played all of the Mega Man games, but these two are really good Mega Man games. It really surprised me. Mr. Nuts is a fun platformer. I hear there's a Super Nintendo version, and I definitely want to get that sometime soon. But this is really good. It translates well onto the Game Boy Color. I really enjoy this game. And then we have here Wendy Every Which Way, which is a great game. It was put out by Way Forward. It's a puzzle platformer. You go through these short little levels, and it has like this gravity mechanic to it. You can kind of switch gravity, so you can jump onto walls and, you know, jump off of walls onto the ground. It's pretty fun. The main character is Wendy, and she's actually a character that shows up in Casper, or she did show up in Casper comic books. So she's been out for a really long time, and I never even knew about her. But this game is just so cute. It's pretty simplistic, but it's a lot of fun to play. I also have some boxed Game Boy games here as well. I actually got these from a local record store that sells like records and CDs and tapes and, you know, used games and modern games, stuff like that. And they were having a sale over Labor Day weekend, and it was like 30% off everything that was in stock. So, you know, I saw some boxed Game Boy games, so I was like, oh, might as well pick them up. And I got this Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3, despite me having like 3 copies of this game loose. But I saw it in box for like $7, so I was like, hey, might as well grab it. Harvest Moon GBC. So this is the Game Boy Color version of Harvest Moon. Surprisingly, this was $2, and it's boxed and complete in great condition. I don't know what's going on there. Phantasy Star Collection for the Game Boy Advance. This actually has Phantasy Star 1, 2, and 3 in it. And this is pretty cool, you know, because I've wanted to get into the Phantasy Star series. I've played Phantasy Star Zero on the DS and whatever Phantasy Star, the first Phantasy Star game that came out on the PSP. But I've always wanted to try the older ones, and this is like the perfect game for that. Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones for the Game Boy Advance. Again, it's boxed and complete. If I'm not mistaken, this is actually the second Fire Emblem game that came out on the Game Boy Advance. I'm not quite sure, but I know that I didn't have it in my collection, and now I do. And then we have here F-Zero Maximum Velocity. Again, boxed and complete. And I already had this. I had a loose copy of it, but you know, this game was only going for $2. So I was like, hey, I'm just going to get the boxed and complete version and get rid of that loose copy. Both F-Zero games on the Game Boy Advance are fantastic. They're really solid racing games. And, you know, going back and playing this makes me want an F-Zero game, a new F-Zero game for the Wii U or, you know, the 3DS. Nintendo needs to make that happen because this series is fantastic. So these are the highlights of my Game Boy collecting over the past year. I hope you guys enjoyed this retro goodies video, and there will be more as more things roll in. I want to thank all of you guys for watching this video, and I'll check you next time.